Hello, my name is Tina Augustus, president of the Chicago West Side Chamber of Commerce. And today I'm joined with Valerie Leonard, founder of nonprofit Utopia, a capacity building ecosystem serving nonprofit founders and executive directors with over 30 years of sector experience. Valerie has helped nearly 1,000 leaders raise over $100 million through her proprietary frameworks. We're here today because in just a few days, she's hosting something that could change the trajectory of your nonprofit dream. And I wanted you to hear directly from her why it matters. And I formulated some questions here that I'm going to ask Valerie. So, Valerie, you've been in and around the nonprofit sector for 3 decades. What made you want to build something specifically for people who are just starting out before they filled a single form?
Yes, yes, yes. Operative word. I've been around, right? A while. I've seen some things, right? I've seen people who want to do the work and felt overwhelmed by the legal burdens. They fill out forms using common sense, and we find out very quickly that common sense doesn't really help very much when you are starting out
Mm,
filling out those
okay,
forms and you're nodding like you know exactly what I'm talking about. You
definitely.
you start up and you're like, "Well, what part of mission don't you understand?" But, nowhere does the word mission enter when you're starting a nonprofit, right? So, just helping people to navigate that maze of government bureaucracy, seeing people who wanna do the right thing, but not understanding that the paperwork, if you don't fill it out correctly, can put you in awkward positions, sometimes jail, right? So I just want to
True.
make sure that we can build the capacity of people in our communities to do the right thing, do good in the hood, right?
Mm, yeah. So now we're streaming live. What platforms? I know we're on StreamYard, and then what other platforms? Because I was trying to find you on Facebook.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. We're on Facebook, Valerie F. Leonard. I'm sorry, Valerie Leonard on Facebook,
Okay.
Nonprofit Utopia on Facebook, Valerie F. Leonard on LinkedIn, and Nonprofit Utopia on YouTube. So we're multi-streaming right
Mhm.
now.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Wonderful. And then are you on YouTube or any other, this is so that the listeners will be able to, find you.
Yes. Yes. So we're on YouTube, Nonprofit Utopia. We're
Mhm,
on LinkedIn, and with LinkedIn, that's my personal account,
mhm.
Valerie Leonard,
Got
and Facebook, my personal account, Valerie Leonard, as well as Facebook, Nonprofit Utopia.
Okey doke. Wonderful. Okay, now we're gonna get down to business. I have some questions to, ask to help our listeners kinda get sorta like a little bit more information on what the workshops entail.
Mhm.
What's the biggest mistake you see aspiring nonprofit founders make before they even start the paperwork? I think I kinda asked that and kinda
Yeah.
bit about that.
Yeah, but the good thing is there's more than one biggest mistake, right? I can think of several off the top of my head. So,
Mhm,
we talked about the fact that using common sense to fill out these forms, that's a huge mistake. It's a recipe for delay. There's certain language that you absolutely have to plagiarize word
yes.
for word if you're going to get tax exempt status.
Mhm,
It's important to realize that just because your mission statement says X and the state of Illinois allows Y, just because that is so doesn't necessarily mean that your paperwork is going to pass muster with the IRS. And most
Mm.
of us are not walking around with the state codes in our brains, right?
Right, right.
Another mistake people make, I think, is, it seems to make sense to use friends and family when you're starting out, but that also is a recipe, not necessarily for disaster, even though it can be because it does cause a conflict of interest. But the IRS is interested in, family relationships. They're interested in business relationships that look like they're a little bit incestuous. So making sure that there are no conflicts of interest on your board, making sure that you don't even give the appearance that your organization has people who will profit at the expense of the community. So
Mhm.
things like that, are very important. Sometimes we walk into things very innocently that can cause us a lot of problems. Another mistake that people make is trying to solidify political support, partisan political support
Sure.
from people as they develop their organizations. And I'm going to ask you, from your experience, what are some of the things that you've seen, Tina?
As far as things that need to be done before starting a nonprofit?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, some of the mistakes I've seen people make was forming, not even getting their articles
Hmm.
incorporated, and filing with the state, the name of the organization. They just create a name and they just go on
Straight
and
to the
do.
IRS.
Yeah. Yes. Some don't even do that. Some don't even go to the IRS. They just go ahead and give it a name. They place it on the T-shirts. For example, basketball organizations, they recruit youth and the parents, and they start holding competitions before they even form or
Mhm.
get their organization formed through the state. So
Right.
I've experienced that and had to help them with their articles of incorporation and the bylaws and things like that.
And the
Yeah.
late fees and the
Yep.
penalties.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and Tina, you've always been really, really good for cleaning up other people's mess, right? Yes. Most
Yes,
people don't
I
wanna
I
do
have seen some of the worst, and some people, just kinda, made a mistake and skipped a few steps.
it.
Yeah.
Mhm. And another mistake I see too, we make the assumption that just because it's nonprofit, one, we don't make money at these things. Everything we do, even charity, is gonna cost money.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yes.
another problem we have is not really understanding the community needs. We grow up in a place, we live in a place, we make the assumption that, okay, I know what's going on, right? But we don't really do the homework to understand, what really is going on. We don't look at the data, see what the data is telling us about the demographics of a
Mhm.
place, because sometimes we have a tendency to just start and assume that people are going to come just because we started something. We don't think about who else is out there doing the same thing. How many people are there who might need this service? Um, could we be duplicating what other people have? Are there some other unmet needs? So we're not necessarily putting on our business hat, right? We're
Right.
putting on that charity hat. But nonprofits are businesses. It's just a different tax structure.
Mhm. Alright, so, talking about the IRS, reality, you've identified 13 specific reasons the IRS rejects nonprofit applications. That's a surprising precise number. What's behind it, and what surprises founders most?
Yeah, so those numbers, 13 come from personal experience working with nonprofits, as well as coming from the IRS themselves. We're not gonna go into all 13 because that's not what the show is about, But
Mhm.
next week, if you join me, we will go into all 13.
Okay.
One of the things that the IRS is very, very clear on is they don't want people to generate personal profits
Mhm.
from charity work. So in exchange for being tax exempt, you have to, give more disclosure about your activities. And then you also have to make sure that the people who are starting the organization are not enriching themselves.
Mm.
So,
Okay.
the IRS is very clear about that. They don't want to have any conflicts of interest. And if you do, they want to make sure those are disclosed. And sometimes you can't avoid conflicts of interest, but if it looks like you have so many conflicts of interest that your charitable purpose is not being
Mhm.
served, that can be a problem, right?
Mhm.
The IRS has disbanded organizations that look like, they were not in there for the community, but for the enrichment of themselves. So those
Right.
are a few reasons, but next week we'll go into all 13.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. So the attorney myth. A lot of aspiring founders believe they need to hire an attorney to incorporate. Is that true?
I think, okay, yes, it's true. It's a true myth. And I believe, at least in the state of Illinois, they perpetuate the myth. All right. So, for example, when you start your organization, you have to go through the Secretary of State's office to file your uh, articles of incorporation, or you go to the Attorney General's office in order to register and let them know that you're an organization, you're going to be fundraising. If you
Right.
ask people who wrote, if they, the people who actually wrote these applications, ask them one question, you have to see an attorney. So it's kind of embedded in our minds, if the people who are actually writing these forms are sending us to an attorney, that must be the only way that we can do it. And plus, the language is so vague in some cases and so
Mhm.
specific in others, but it's language that we don't walk around using. It's almost a code. So
Mm.
feel like, wow, I really need some help. These attorneys must know what they're doing. But if you do a little bit of research, or shall I say a lot of research, because there's a lot more to the process than meets the eye. Some people much rather pay an attorney and let them deal with the headache, right? Because they also know that there are consequences to not getting the paperwork right the first time or the second.
Right.
There's some
Right.
people who actually, go on and on. They're like, "Uncle, uncle." But, people like you and I, we know the process, so we can help them
Right.
navigate.
And the language.
Yes, yes, yes. That's the number one thing, the language. It's not
Yeah.
common sense.
So, the formation picture. What are you seeing in terms of nonprofit formation trends right now? Is this a good time to start a nonprofit?
Yeah, there's a good time, but, it's interesting. We have, first of all, over 2,000,000 nonprofits in the United States. There are over 6,000 nonprofits in the city of Chicago, drilling
Mm,
down North
that's the big
Lawndale.
number.
Yeah, and drilling down to North Lawndale, this little tiny 4-mile area, you know depending on whether or not you include your Black clubs and churches. I mean, it's over 250. Some of
That's,
them are
yeah,
actual
that's a
tax
large
exempt
number.
organizations, and others are out there doing social services. Um, and then people say, we got so many, we don't need any more. But all you gotta do is look out your window and see that the needs are still great.
That's so true.
Yeah, I think it's a good time to start a nonprofit.
Mm.
However, that does not mean it's without its challenges, which, looking at what's going on in Washington, D.C. with, the Trump administration, they put a lot of barriers up, but yeah, the need is still great. So it'll be a challenging time. And then you have just as many organizations going out of business involuntarily every year as you do starting in the state of Illinois, roughly.
Okay.
And when I say going out of business involuntarily, that means if folks have not filed their annual report, which I
Mhm.
don't know how much it costs. Is it like $15 or less, $10 for the
Yeah,
non.
it may be about 10, possibly 15. Now, if you're late, then you're paying a large fee because
Mhm.
they would tack those large fees on there if you're late. But if you're on time, it's just a few dollars.
Yeah, think about it. There are
Mm,
people who actually lose their organizations
mm,
because don't think about filing, with the Secretary of State's
right.
office.
When that letter comes in the mail.
Right, right, right. So, yeah, so a lot of people actually their organizations, they may have tax exempt status for an organization that legally doesn't exist anymore just because they forgot to fill out that form with the
Right. So
secretary.
talking about dissolution, you've analyzed Illinois' dissolution trends. What's the data telling us about why nonprofits close?
Yeah, one of the main reasons why nonprofits close, and when we're talking about involuntary dissolution, that is when you forget to file this form, your annual report with the Secretary of State.
Mhm.
I believe you can be as late as is it 180 days, something like that, either 180 or
Mhm.
240, but I believe it's 180. Um, Many people don't realize, one, that they have to fill out that form. They're so busy thinking about the
And it's
990,
very simple too.
yeah,
It's
and
very
the
simple form.
8990, and they don't have systems in place to remind them, right, of
Mhm.
what it is they have to do.
Mm. Okay. So, moving on to the personal story, you had planned to launch this course earlier last summer. If I understand correctly, what happened and what kept you committed to bringing this to the world?
Yeah, we had a family emergency, where they say life is lifing.
Mhm, mhm,
So I had a family emergency right around the time when we were supposed to launch, and that threw our schedule off. But my North Star has always been start this program, start this class where
mhm,
people not only understand how to navigate, the bureaucracy, but they end up with a fully compliant organization where they can hit the ground running, raising funds.
mhm,
It was now I say I was blessed in that when I started an organization, I had access to some of the best attorneys, some of the best
mhm,
consultants, but that is not normal,
mhm.
right? Most people are doing it by hook or by crook, and hopefully more by hook than by crook. Just learning as they go and usually making mistakes. This class, that we're going to be launching is going to show you how to do it right the first time, and you will literally cut years off your developmental process just from
Wonderful,
a 3-month.
wonderful. Tell us about the 3-day nonprofit decision sprint. What is it? Who is it for? And what will someone be able to do after 3 days that they couldn't do before?
All right, so this is a free sprint, and when we say sprint, we're talking about take